Hello, everybody. My name is Sam. I am an adoptions worker here at the Adoptions Family Association. I just wanted to welcome everybody today to the Adoption Permanency and Permanency Awareness Panel and start by thanking everybody for coming today and sharing part of your adoption journey with us. I would like to start by doing a land acknowledgement on behalf of the Adoptions Family Association. So I will start with that. So we work and live on the ancestral unceded lands of the coastal Salish, Kwantlen, and Stolo land. Adoption Family Association is committed to listening, learning, and participating in truth and reconciliation. So I will be asking the participants some questions along with my coworker Christy and we will kind of popcorn the questions as we had talked about, but I will pass it along to Christy to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Christy, and I'm a child-specific recruiter for AFA BC. I would like to acknowledge that I live on the traditional territories of the Kwantlen Nations in the Cowichan Valley on Vancouver Island. I'd now like to pass it over to Marko.
Thanks so much, Christy. I'm Marko. I am also a program assistant here at the Adoptive Families Association of BC. I'm also a graduate student at the University of British Columbia, studying child welfare and adoption and all that kind of stuff. And I'm also an adoptee and a youth from care, with most of my experience being from Ontario. I'm new to the British Columbia child welfare landscape, so I'm really happy to be here. I'm tuning in from the unceded ancestral, never surrendered territory of the Musqueam Nation here at UBC. And I wanted to share a quote by a woman named Marko. Lee was a member of the Stalo Nation, a world-renowned author, and a good teacher of mine at the University of Toronto. And in her book, Memory Serves, she writes, "Listening is an emotional, spiritual, and physical act. It takes a huge emotional commitment to listen, to sort, to imagine the intent, to evaluate, to process, and to seek the connection to the words so that remembering can be fair and just. Spiritually, words are sacred. This makes listening a ceremony. And because it engages our imagination, it is also an art form. Our best selves, the oldest thread of our remembering processes, are invoked, and we seek connection with a will." This quote reminds me that listening is such a crucial element in building meaningful relationships, and that building relationships is fundamental in strengthening and nourishing our adoption and permanency communities. I'm honored and humbled with the opportunity to not only have my voice heard today, but those voices of other members of my community.
Thank you, Marko. So today's panel participants are all community members who have experience with adoption and permanency. So I will let participants introduce themselves, and they're welcomed to share who they are in the galaxy if they would like to. So I will start by passing it on to Ashleigh.
Hi there, my name is Ashleigh Martin Flatt, and I'm on the unceded territory of the Nanaimo people in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island. I'm super happy to be with all of you brilliant folks today. I am a professional who works, I'm a clinical counselor as well as a registered social worker who works with children, youth, and families who are somewhere involved in their permanency journey. And I also teach courses at post-secondary education around child welfare as well. But more importantly, I'm also a parent through adoption, as well as impacted by adoption as being part of a birth family as well. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for sharing, Ashleigh. I will pass it on to Sherry.
Hi, so I'm an adoptive mom and an advocate for openness, and I'm just honored to be here today with everyone, and look forward to sharing our stories together.
Thank you, Sherry. I will pass it on to Stephan.
Hello, I'm Stephan, and I'm a biological father who gave my daughter up for adoption, and I'm just really grateful for this process.
Thank you, Stefan. I will pass it on to Karina.
Thank you. My name is Karina. I am a foster mom here in BC, and I'm just very grateful to be here with everybody in this beautiful panel, and to each of you adoptive parents for considering this. I'm so grateful for each of you.
Thank you, Karina, and thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. We will get started with our first round of questions. So we'll be doing 3 questions. I will start with our first round with Marko, and our first question for Marko is, what has adoption taught you?
I think about this question and I want to give like this is the one thing that I've learned, and if there's anything anyone could take away, let it be this. And I don't. There's so many things that I have learned through adoption. I think what I've learned so far in my journey and what stuck out most to me is that adoption and permanency really is a journey of unlearning and relearning. And that has just kind of been the story of my life so far. And it's been unlearning maybe certain narratives that I've convinced myself were true as a result of my journey in foster care and my adoption breakdown, and which I had to unlearn that maybe those things are not true, that maybe I wasn't good enough, that those narratives don't serve me anymore, and that this journey really does involve a lot of unlearning and relearning a whole bunch of different things. As well as adoption is a lifelong journey. That was a really hard thing for me to learn. I thought, I really did think that if I went to enough therapy sessions, I could be one and done with all of this stuff and put it behind me, and realized it didn't work that way. So I thought maybe if I advocated enough times and made my voice heard in enough spaces, then I'll reach a point where I've kind of graduated from adoption and permanency. And that didn't work out either. So I thought maybe it goes away with age. And so far, that doesn't seem to be the truth either. So I am left with the truth that it is a lifelong journey, and it's something that I continue to learn every day and as it ebbs and flows. And I've learned that some days are better than others. And that, most importantly, my journey doesn't necessarily look like everybody else's journey in adoption and permanency, and that's okay. That my journey isn't any less valid because it doesn't look like everybody else's. So that's what I've learned about adoption and permanency so far.
Thank you for sharing, Marko. I really find interesting that the unlearning that you mentioned. That was like something that jumped out at me. But I appreciate you sharing. So next we will move on to Sherry, and I'm going to be asking Sherry, what does openness mean to you?
So I think openness is important because I feel it's vital to the well-being of adopted children. At least it has been for our children, and it literally means being open to contact or connection between birth family or significant relationships to your children prior to adoption. It means opening your heart, your mind, and your family. If you can open yourself up, I feel your children may be more willing to open themselves up. We can't expect our children to accept everyone in our lives if we aren't willing to do the same for them. It takes incredible courage for children to leave everything and everyone they know to start a new life, often with complete strangers. I have tried to just imagine putting myself in that situation, and it's too difficult to even think of. I feel maintaining their close connections when possible are key to keeping children feeling safe and secure. I know there are many different scenarios when children are adopted, and there are situations when it's not an option, which is very unfortunate. We feel honored it is an option for us, and it's a privilege that we have birth families, foster families, and sibling adoptive families willing to have a connection with our family, and it has been an integral piece of our children's well-being and self-identity. We would never want to cut them off from all the love that is out there for them, so we nurture it and figure out positive ways for them to receive it. I look at openness as bridging the children's past to their future, honoring the relationships they have developed and that are important to them, and blending them with all their new relationships and family connections, and making one big extended family. I'm not saying this is easy or perfect, but it is very important, and we need to do whatever we can to make it possible. Openness is also keeping children connected to their culture, heritage, medical history, family history, traditions, and stories. My children are lucky to know and have relationships with their birth family and have access to all that information and understand their roots. I do have a cousin who didn't know who her birth father was for almost 50 years, and I experienced how difficult that was for her. She grew up not having all the important information she needed or the relationships she could have fostered. She did not know what half her heritage was, which makes it very difficult to self-identify when you don't know what to identify with. She had to keep the paternal health history form blank at the doctor's office and did not know if she should be screening for certain diseases as she aged. She was also not able to pass that information on to her children. She thought up scenarios, good and bad, always wondering every day, thinking maybe she passed her birth father on the street unknowingly. She always had an inner void, a feeling of missing a part of herself, a constant deep curiosity, and a need to find answers. My cousin did eventually find her birth father through Ancestry.ca. She now has a huge extended family with 3 half-sisters that look very much like her. She is half Italian and had ironically planned a trip to Italy just before she found out all this information. She feels complete now and has an inner peace she never had before and has had so many questions answered for herself and her family. It's just unfortunate she had to feel incomplete and wait most of her life for those missing pieces when they were all known and could have been available to her. She says just knowing her birth father's identity was huge. She always thought other people were so lucky to know their heritage when it is something most of us just take for granted. We didn't meet until she was 20 years old, as that is how long it took to access her non-identifying information from the Adoption Disclosure Registry. I did not know she even existed, so it was quite a shock when I received a phone call saying I had a cousin that wanted to meet me. I'm so thankful for that day, as we have developed such a strong connection, and I feel more like we are soul sisters. We're just over 1 year apart in age and have so many similarities and connect on many different levels. I couldn't imagine not having her in my life now, and we both wish we had been able to have a relationship growing up. Openness isn't always with birth parents or immediate family. It could be a cousin, an auntie, a teacher, a coach, a school friend. Happiness is feeling connected with, which often comes from people who understand what children have been through and who the children relate to. These relationships give them a sense of belonging, which helps them feel calm and content. Isn't that what we all want for our children? Openness agreements are child-centered and always what is in the best interest for them. It can be difficult for adoptive and birth families to put aside their own needs or what may be convenient for them and stay focused on what is truly best for children. This takes a lot of maturity, patience, self-reflection, compassion, and flexibility. We need to acknowledge that there are very good reasons children are not with their birth families and acknowledge and accept that. Some people do not have the same opportunities, education, access, support, or guidance as a lot of us have been privileged to have. If you have resources or gifts that others may not, ask yourself, how can you share them to support those that don't? How can you be creative and proactive to meet your child's need of staying connected? It would be my worst nightmare not to be able to parent my children, whatever the reason may be. That must be so hard for any parent to accept. It is not because birth parents don't love their children, which must be so heartbreaking. It's not our job to judge or fix. It is just our job to find ways to foster safe and healthy connections however we can. I find kindness and empathy go a long way, and that has always helped us move toward our goal of openness. When your children are old enough to have an opinion about openness, ask them what it is, how do they feel, and what do they want? Honor their feelings and give them a voice and a choice. Now my children are teenagers. I let them decide what they are comfortable with. I let them choose as their feelings, thoughts, and emotions change. When they were younger, we would discuss how long they were comfortable talking on the phone and had a plan for when they wanted to end the conversation. We wrote out how they could politely say goodbye when they could, and they could read it if they forgot what to say. If that didn't work, they would pass the phone to me to say goodbye so they weren't left feeling uncomfortable. We're always working together on ways to keep communication positive and let the kids have input on what worked for them. Email has been a good way to communicate with birth family if we need to set boundaries or need to explain something. It gives them a chance to read it over more than once, process it, and respond if they want to. This often works better than verbal communication with some people. I have found that despite how our children are feeling towards certain relationships, they are always desperate for that connection and have never turned down an opportunity for contact. We make sure it's supervised and safe, make sure they know what the plan is, what to expect, and have signals if they ever feel uncomfortable, and then we make it happen. We run scenarios ahead of time and discuss who is invited, discuss that they may or may not show up, they may be in a good space, they may be having a hard day. We make sure they know if things don't go as planned, what we will do, but most importantly, that nothing is their fault ever. If someone doesn't show up, return a phone call, forgets a birthday, it's not because they wanted to or they don't care, it's because they can't right now. If someone shows up and they're not in a good space, it has nothing to do with our children. It means that person is struggling. I think it's important to verbalize these messages and not just assume children understand that side of things and communicate that they are always loved. Children don't understand adult problems, so they can internalize them and feel unworthy, unlovable, or empty. Children need a lot of reassurance to overcome this, and actions of love from the relationships they value seem to be our best way to show them they are worthy and loved. One time before birth family visit, my daughter told me that she knew some of the reasons why they weren't with their birth parents anymore, but she wanted to be excited for the visits and have good thoughts and not have bad thoughts. I was so impressed with her honesty and her ability to put into words how she was feeling. I told her she should be having good thoughts and feelings, and I was happy for her she was excited for the visit. We don't want our kids getting caught up with adult problems. We want them to relax and be kids, to love freely and not feel guilty for wanting to love their family. We also don't want them feeling responsible for anyone, feel like they need to parent their parents, and think they need to fix anything. We have always told them the best way to make their birth family happy is just to make them proud, to be happy themselves and try their best in whatever they do. That is the best gift, and that is what would make everyone the happiest. Children need a lot of reassurance and often want permission to do what is in their hearts. When we planned a birth family visit, we would mark it on the calendar, and my son would count down the days and tell me how excited he was. Then he would ask me if I was excited. I would reassure him that, yes, of course, I'm very excited too. They need to know it's okay to be excited, maintain these relationships, and that adoption is about adding love, not taking it away. It is incredible that this little 6-year-old wanted to know how I was feeling to make sure everyone was happy and excited for the visit. He just wanted all the people he loved to be together, which is healthy and normal and what every child deserves. There may be times when we need to shorten a visit or adults need to step in, but the kids can see us setting boundaries and know what is appropriate and what is not. We demonstrate how to be respectful and compassionate while maintaining what is in the best interest of our kids. We always make sure the kids know it is never about them. It is a huge priority to make sure children don't internalize other people's behavior or the fact they are adopted and think they aren't loved, blame themselves, or think they did something wrong. It also seems to help kids understand better when they see things for themselves and they would rather know than not know. They will form their own opinions, and we have learned we can't protect them from everything, but we can be there to help them through it. Our children will want relationships with their birth family when they're adults, so it's in their best interest to teach them how to do that in a positive way and let them know we are always there to help support them, so they will talk to us about it and always be open. That was a long answer.
No, we appreciate everything. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate all the different members of the galaxy that you talked about, communication, your lived stories, your cousin, the extended family. Like, it gave a very broad aspect of openness about several members of the galaxy, and I think that was very impactful. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, next I will ask Ashleigh the same question. What does openness mean to you?
Well, I think Sherry did a great job of capturing so many really important aspects about openness. When I think about openness, I think going back to what Marko said, there's a lot of things that have to be unlearned by adoptive parents when it comes to openness. Adoption was always so shrouded in secrecy previously, and that still plays really strong into people's minds about how they want to move forward with their children. And often with secrecy comes shame, and there's nothing that children should be carrying around with them, or anybody a part of this equation should be carrying around with them with shame. So there's a lot of unlearning that has to occur in regards to openness. And when we split it into two areas, it's kind of openness, like communication. How do you communicate with your kids about who they are, their birth story, their ancestry, their heritage, their adoption story? And then the other side of openness, which could potentially be the relationship with their birth family and extended family. And both of those are equally important, and they're not one-off discussions. It's part of somebody's identity, and it has to grow developmentally. The story has to grow developmentally with them. And so I think that's also part of that unlearning, as we sometimes hear when someone says, when did you find out you were adopted? Or when did you learn about this one thing, as if it was a one-time discussion? But it's an evolution of as children grow and develop to being these amazing humans, that their story grows and develops with them as well. When I think about openness from my own experience, it means to my kids, I think, identity. It means self-worth. It means knowing where you get really long eyelashes from, or why you're a fast runner. It means seeing other people who have the same skin color as you, or seeing other people who have the same DNA as you. And it just means having a really large extended family. As my one daughter says, your heart can love, there's no limit to how many people your heart can love. And I think that's part of what needs to be unlearned for adoptive parents sometimes, is that we might feel insecure about our place, but really that children aren't possessions to be owned, but for all of us to have the privilege of walking alongside them, their birth family and their adoptive parents. And openness allows for that. Openness allows for coming together and being a web around kids to offer them support, and to most importantly, know who they are and where they come from, so that their feet walk firmly on this ground.
Thank you, Ashleigh. I appreciate your the lived experience and your clinical experience. It's really great to hear from you. We will move on to Karina. What does openness mean to you?
Thank you. Very beautiful answers, Jerry and Ashleigh. That's hard to follow, but I agree with everything you are both sharing. I see that openness looks a little bit like building bridges between the life that you are building with your kids and the different connections that they might have in their lives. And each of those connections is going to represent an important part of your kid's identity. And I think the reality is, like Sherry was saying, it's not always a possibility with every single relationship, but when it is, it really can make a world of difference in the process of adoption and beyond, everything that Ashleigh was also sharing. And so, as Sherry mentioned, it's not just with the biological family. It's also, it can be a teacher, it can be a foster parent, it can be a friend, anybody who might be meaningful and important in your kid's life. And that relationship is also going to become an important relationship to you as an adoptive parent. And I feel like openness might sound a little scary or a little intimidating sometimes to some people, and that's okay to feel that. But I've found, in my experience at least, is that openness actually helps everybody. It helps the adoptive family, and it helps the biological parents. And biological parents are going through a huge deal of pain and struggles as well, and they're making an incredible sacrifice, and I want to recognize that as well. And it helps foster parents, and it helps, of course, above all, your kid the most. And what I've experienced as from the perspective of a foster parent is that adoption, the process itself can be extremely challenging sometimes for our kids, and it really can shake their entire world for good, because of course they're being adopted and their dream is finally coming true. But at the same time, I feel like it can be very scary, and they might be experiencing a lot of mixed emotions. And on one side, they're happy because they are being adopted, but they're also afraid, or they might be sad because they might be feeling that they could be losing loved ones. And so I perceived it a little bit like a combination between having a celebration and then also the sense of loss and grief. And that's very challenging to go through. And so I feel that openness can really give that reassurance that a child needs to be able to celebrate the adoption, but without that struggle. So they're able to enjoy, and they're able to see that people in their lives aren't just going away, that they're going to be able to stay connected. And they know that, yes, sure, things are going to be changing and they're going to be a little bit different, but their support system will remain, and it'll actually grow. And so that makes things a lot easier for them. Through openness, I think kids don't feel like they have to lose a part of their lives in order to fulfill their dream to be adopted. It gives them a sense of stability as well, and I feel that that can be extremely helpful. And also for you as an adoptive parent, because building those connections can be amazing. During the early stages, it'll help you get to know your kid better. And then later on, those relationships can really become very solid in your life. I have a great relationship with my kids' adoptive parents, and also my kids who aren't being adopted, but I still foster teams, and I have great relationships with, youth workers. There's some youth workers who have been with the kids since they were babies or since they were little, and so of course those relationships are extremely important for me to maintain. And with the adoptive families, it's made it so much easier for us. We've talked quite a bit from the moment that the family received the file, and then through the process of adoption, and we coordinated back and forth, the visits going back and forth, and we shared our joys and our pains and our frustrations, and it was very difficult times sometimes. It can be challenging with the waiting times and the meetings and a lot of things that are involved. But we were able to work together to make it all a lot easier for my youth, who's now their son. And so it was wonderful. And I love it that when they come and visit, we can have dinner together, and we can catch up, and we can text one another. And I'm still in touch with my youth, and it's just super beautiful because, of course, I miss them. And so this helps me a ton. And I'm very grateful to his adoptive family just for allowing that openness, and they have that openness with the biological families, and also with other important relationships in their son's life. And so as a foster parent, I feel that I go through a little bit of that same initial process where I have to lean a lot on previous relationships to get to know my child. And then I try to build relationships with the biological family and previous foster homes and their parents and everybody else who might be close to my child and who might know my kid. And it helps me. And I have found it incredibly valuable to do this. And at the beginning, those relationships do feel like more like Q&A sessions. You're bombarding everybody with questions. And it's okay, because it's okay to ask the questions and to feel that, hey, you know what, I don't have to know everything. I don't have to have all the answers. It's okay to ask. It's okay to not know what to do in a particular situation, and to contact a biological parent or a foster parent or somebody else, and to get some of the feedback. And you might be surprised about how something you thought might be extremely difficult to solve might be very simple. And just a silly example that I'm thinking about now is one of my kids, I was having trouble because he didn't want to shower. And I was ready to lose my mind. He just didn't want to shower. And I was running out of options. So I made that call and I contacted a previous foster parent. And, you know, it was just as simple as finding out that my kid was actually very sensitive to bright lights. And so all I had to do was change the light bulbs in my bathroom or in his bathroom, and that was it. Problem solved. And so that would be something simple, but it would be also in very sensitive situations, like, you know, you're talking about triggers or you're talking about fears and things that help soothe your child. And so at the beginning, yes, you're gonna find that you're asking a lot of questions, and then little by little you're going to ask less questions, but you're still going to find a lot of reasons to maintain those relationships in your kids' lives and in your life. And so your kids are greatly going to benefit from this level of openness and from knowing that they won't be losing people they love, but that on the contrary, they will be gaining through the process of adoption. And so will everybody else, including.
Thank you, Karina. That story at the end, like just how openness and communication, how something as dimming the lights really supported your youth. That's a great example of the greatness that openness can have. Thank you for sharing. We will move on to Stephan, and the same question: what does openness mean to you?
For me, openness is the opportunity for me to fulfill my two roles as a biological father. The first role being showing my daughter that choosing adoption came from a place of love and care. And she's young right now, so that basically just involves like swinging her as high as we can when we're walking to the park, building like forts and scurrying through them with flashlights, noodle swimming her in circles until our little hands are like raisins. I'm just showering her with like endless love and affection at every opportunity that I can. So there's really no doubt in her like beautiful little mind how much BF Steph cares for her. She calls me BF Steph, birth father Steph. And I feel like my second responsibility is to answer questions and be a storyteller. That really hasn't come up yet. She's young, but I feel like I would like her to understand that I pushed for adoption because of my inability to care for her and my intense desire for her to have the best life possible. And I also feel like if she hears the many beautiful stories like about my growing up, about our lineage, our heritage, she might better understand where she came from biologically. Like my father, he passed away in 2006 and he wrote like 3 books for his grandkids because he was never going to meet them. So just so she can just get familiar with where she came from. So basically, openness offers me the opportunity to show my daughter how my push for adoption came from a place of forever love, as well as to engage in the role of answering any questions that she may have regarding her biological ancestry.
Thank you for sharing that about your dad and her granddad. That's so amazing to have. I appreciate you sharing. I will now pass it on to Christy to ask the second questions.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for sharing so far. This second question goes to Ashleigh. So from your experience, what types of supports do you find that families are most in need of?
I think that after a child is placed with them, the types of supports that families are needed with is that the parents actually need support. Everyone's really quick to call to look for something for a little one to go into, or when I say little one, I mean anyone under 19. So the whole range. But really, I think that when we have kids transitioning to adoption, we really just need to let them be kids, and as much as possible, we need to let them just play, have fun, and have really focus on helping them walk through their grief process and just being present with them. And that it's really beneficial for adoptive parents to get the supports and for them to get some supports around parenting strategies for somebody who's grieving, parenting strategies for somebody who has had high levels of exposure to trauma and how we might want to parent differently. And probably in my role, the biggest thing that I often say that I provide support to adoptive parents is around our need to really focus on connecting before we're correcting. And that first chunk of time, like our year that we get together, is just about like just building a connection, like laugh together, have fun, love, and just really get a sense of attachment to each other, and focus less around what is it. Sometimes we get this idea of like what, especially for kids who may be coming from the foster care system, about what we might needs to be fixed. And that's problematic. It's hard to fall in love with someone who's always trying to fix you. And so if we could just really focus on those connections, as well as building those connections with birth family, extended family. So supports in navigating openness, going out with birth dad, like BF Stephan, to go out for coffee and just get to know each other, even away from your child, and just build connections with them and have support in how you navigate those roles. But I would really, really put the emphasis on the smallest person in the equation should not be doing all the heavy lifting. It should be the adults, and that's who requires the supports, and that's who requires to put the extra effort in. And let's just let kids be who they were meant to be, and let's just let them shine and be loved by everyone, and the rest of us do some of that heavy lifting.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing in your experience what supports are mainly beneficial to the families. Next question, I'll go over to Sherry. What relationships, if any, were most impactful to you throughout your permanency journey?
Before I answer that, I just want to say, wow, thank you everybody for sharing. All your responses are amazing. So we have openness through two separate adoptions. One that is local, and we were matched through the Ministry of Children and Family Development, and the other adoption is not local, and we were chosen by the birth family. I think all our openness relationships have been impactful, whether they are in person, over social media, through letters and pictures. They are all very important connections to us. For children to see similarities in appearance, find out they have the same favorite color as their birth mom, or have similar personality traits, it helps our children honor their biological connection for positive identity within themselves. It's something fun we can discuss to start conversations and let them know we want to discuss birth family, that we want to be involved as they discover who they are and where they came from. We never want our children to feel like it's a competition of who they love, or that they may hurt feelings if they show love towards someone. We only want them to know it's healthy and positive to love everyone and to discuss their backgrounds with us. We've had a significant relationship from the very beginning with our children's foster family of our locally adopted kids. They have been very integral to an extremely smooth transition as our children trusted them. So when the foster parents accepted us into their lives, the children felt safe to do so also. We call them Nana and Papa, and they are still very involved and important people in our lives. We were fortunate to have a connection with them before we met our children. So we were able to know our kids' routines, likes and dislikes, personalities, triggers, and so much information that was extremely helpful to us meeting their needs when they moved in. There were many phone calls and emails, and they were willing to help us understand the children and wanted to be part of their lives moving forward. We became good friends before we even met, which really helped take the awkwardness out of our first visit and made the kids feel comfortable, as there was a lot of acceptance, excitement, and positivity. It gave our kids confidence in us, knowing the people they trusted supported the adoption. There was a lot of contact with the foster parents during our transition to reassure the kids they would always maintain that connection. I never hesitated to pick up the phone or email if I had a question or concern. Nana was always there to help in any way she could. I never felt that she would judge me or felt like I was bothering her. We both just had the children's best interest at heart, knew this was a huge transition for them, and they needed all of us working together to make them feel secure. A few weeks after our children moved in, I remember my other daughter looking at a picture of our dog that had passed away, and she started crying because she missed him. My son immediately burst into tears too, even though he had never met this dog. He was quite upset, and I knew my daughter's feelings of loss had triggered the loss he was feeling also, not just for the people he had to leave, but also the dog he was attached to at his foster home. I took him into my room and cuddled up with him in a blanket, and I asked him if he wanted to call Nana. He shook his head yes, as he was too upset to talk, so we called her. I explained the situation and she instantly understood and calmly started talking in a soothing voice about the doves they used to watch in their yard. Nana was able to calm him down immediately. All he needed was to hear her voice and have that connection with her, and he felt supported by both of us. I think it's so important in those moments to meet their needs the best way possible, not minimize them or wish them away, but validate how they feel, give them the emotional support they need, and let them know it's normal and healthy to let those feelings out, even if he didn't understand why he was so emotional. This is just one example of Nana being available, being a consistent support, and always picking up the phone when we called. She remembers birthdays, shows up to visits, calls to check in, and is always so proud of them. She is a true angel, along with Papa, and we have so much respect and admiration for them. They experienced loss too when our children were adopted, as they truly loved and cared for them. They put their faith in us and trusted us to have openness with them, and they never once showed us anything but love, acceptance, and approval, even though they were dealing with their own emotions of loss and transition. We are forever grateful to have them in our lives and have their love and consistency. We also have openness with another foster mom who looked after our children's birth siblings, so we've gotten to know her well also. She still comes to the family get-togethers even though the siblings aren't with her anymore, and she has developed a close relationship with all of us and loves to see the kids growing up. These are incredible people that we are so lucky to have as part of our extended family. Foster parents have the hardest jobs as they take in children that are often traumatized, neglected, or abused. They deal with all the emotions, behaviors, sleepless nights, and try to put the pieces back together. They help them get adjusted, make them feel loved and special, try to reunite them with their family, or prepare them for adoption and then have to say goodbye. It takes a special person to be able to do that, and it's incredible they continue to support all the kids they help as they move on and grow up. Our children will never forget how safe and loved they felt living with their foster parents, and it's a safe, positive relationship we will always nurture and cherish. Our local birth family relationships have been very important and the best way to keep our children connected to their culture. They have taken us cedar harvesting, taught us cultural traditions, discussed family history, language, and shared their stories and experiences. We met our children's birth family before we met and adopted our children. It was very emotional and there was some fear and uncertainty on both sides, but by the end of the meeting, we were so relieved they seemed open to us and just wanted reassurance they would maintain their connection with the children moving forward. We took some pictures at that meeting and put them up in our house before the children moved in, hoping they would feel we were a united front and accepting of each other to love them together. It's a privilege to have them in our lives, and we're thankful for their willingness to have openness with us. Our relationships have grown with time. You can't force it. We just try to be accommodating, flexible, consistent, and enthusiastic. Now we have strong connections with many family members. The birth grandparents have invited us to their home, cooked us meals, baked us bread, given us gifts, invited us to Easter egg hunts, Christmas parties, and funerals. They have told us we are now part of their family too. That's extremely heartwarming and so positive for the children to witness so they don't have to feel torn or guilty for having feelings toward all of us when we all show love toward each other. The children have been able to stay in contact with their birth siblings, which is also very important to them. Their little brother was adopted by another family who we have become very close with. We have spent weekends together where we do cultural crafts, we visit whenever we can, go to the beach, and truly enjoy each other's company. The other adoptive mom tells me stories about how her kids go to school and discuss their older siblings who are teens but don't live with them, but they see them all the time and how much fun they have, which creates some interesting conversations with their teachers every year. We have also met some of their extended family who are now considered family to us too. Our circle continues to get bigger, which is awesome because it really does take a village and we wouldn't want to be doing this alone. We learn so much from each relationship and can access support when we need it. It's incredible to have so many people cheering for our children, and I would not want it any other way. Our birth family that does not live locally have been very willing to communicate by phone, social media, letters, and pictures. At the beginning of our relationship, they didn't have access to the internet, so we mailed them a disposable camera with a postage paid envelope, and they took pictures of their family and community and mailed it back. It was the best gift ever for my daughter to have these amazing pictures and connection to where they live. When my daughter was growing up and I explained that she was adopted, I'd always told her that her birth parents loved her very much. We didn't always have phone contact due to their situation, but one day when my daughter was old enough to talk on the phone, we were able to have a conversation. My daughter was over the moon, and at the end of the conversation, her birth mom said, "I love you." The look on my daughter's face was pure shock and then excitement. It was like she just couldn't believe her ears. She ran around the house dancing, saying over and over, "She loves me, she loves me." It was the best moment for her to finally accept and believe her birth mom loved and cared about her. I could tell her a million times, but coming from the source was absolutely priceless. The next phone call, the same thing happened, and at the end of the call, her birth mom said, "I love you." After my daughter hung up the phone, she looked at me with big eyes and exclaimed, "She still loves me." She just couldn't believe it. This is more proof that you can never give them enough reassurance. We met my daughter's birth sister when she was here on a trip for work experience. It was so interesting to see their similarities, and she shared a lot of cultural information with us. My daughter was mesmerized by her and said her dream had finally come true that they got to meet in person. It's so nice to have contact with her, and she sends us updates all the time on what is happening with her family. Recently, a baby was born that looked exactly like our daughter when she was born, so they sent us pictures stating how they all thought she resembled our daughter. These are things we can't give her, and appreciate that she can receive this information and stay connected with her roots. She has also been learning their language by doing voice clips on Instagram with her birth siblings, and she can video call and see them in person now. We feel so lucky she has this communication and all her questions can be answered because she has a lot. We have created some of the best, deepest relationships through openness with a common goal of supporting and loving our children. These relationships were developed over time with a lot of effort, understanding, and compassion while dealing with hurt, distance, and addiction. We have overcome a lot of barriers. We have learned a lot, developed trust, and it's our experience when everyone is working together for the higher good of children, we can be successful. It's my hope that we can all continue to be kind, patient, and accommodating to make these relationships as positive as possible moving forward.
Thank you, Sherry, for sharing your stories of openness, and especially with how impactful it is for your children and youth and what the relationships in their lives mean to them. So important.
Yeah, it's been huge. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to ask Marko the same question. What relationships were most impactful to you through your permanency journey?
Yeah, I thought I knew where I wanted to start, and oftentimes this is how it goes. You hear other people's stories, and then your mind just kind of goes and drifts somewhere else. And it kind of reminds me of my earlier point that these journeys, they ebb and flow, our emotions ebb and flow, memories ebb and flow, and just because my stories don't mirror everyone else's, again, doesn't mean it's any less valid. When I talk about, or when we think about relationships and openness is not something that was a part of my permanency journey for various reasons. And I'm in a position now in my life where I've had access to my adoption records and got to look at all of that stuff. And so when I hear these stories about learning about who you are and what your original family was like and whatever, those all come from notes. And I think about, especially as we talk about openness, that openness is not a privilege that has to be earned with good behavior or things like that. And openness was not something that was always afforded to adoptees. Something as simple as getting my record would have been not allowed legally a couple decades ago. It wasn't until a recent development that was a thing. So being in a space where I'm hearing other stories about the impact of openness and how hard our community has fought to get here really inspires me. So I really thank everybody for sharing those stories. When I think about the important relationships for me, there have been many, some of which have been in adoption and permanency communities, and some of which that have not been involved in any way, shape, or form with adoption and permanency that have also helped me in my journey. I think there's two that come to mind for me in terms of really important relationships. And keep in mind, the majority of my adoption and permanency journey happened in Ontario. The first really important relationship for me was with Native Child and Family Services of Toronto. I worked there as a summer camp counselor. Had no idea that this was a child welfare serving agency. Don't know why I didn't, with the name, didn't click in for me. But I took on this summer camp job, and what it was an immersive Indigenous cultural experience. It was somewhere in Northern Ontario overnight. And it was the very first time I was ever with other people that also had a child welfare experience. And I didn't know how to feel in the beginning because it was something that I didn't talk about a lot, didn't want people to know. And it was something I really shied away from. And so being in this camp with Toronto probably being about 3 or 4 hours away, there was nowhere for me to go. So it was either sit there and make the best of it or just distance yourself. And so I decided I would engage to the best of my ability to whatever felt comfortable. And this group was a mix of children and original family coming together for this week to be together. And what was really impactful for me was to listen to children that were younger than me, maybe 10, 11, and 12, reminding me of who I used to be at that age and where they were at in this journey. And I might have been 18 or 19 at the time. And it was a nice contrast to see where I'd come to at 19 years old and seeing where kids were at 11 or 12, and a lot of what they were saying resonating with my experiences at that time. And I think as well, meeting original parents and their stories was really impactful because I think I had a lot of disdain and a lot of frustration with how I came into care and with my original family, and hearing other original parents' perspectives on the challenges that they faced and their involvement in child welfare. Hearing those stories gave me more to mull over and consider, and understanding that my truth and my perspective isn't the only one. And it was really inspiring to see them with their kids, taking that week to be with them, build those relationships, and have that space and opportunity to do so. And that was my first kind of introduction to being in a space with other people that were like me and shared similar experiences. And I think the other one is with Never Too Late. It is an organization with the Adoption Council of Ontario, and what this organization aims to do is to provide permanency for youth who are in the process of aging out of care or who have already aged out of care, but that those young people are still looking for permanency and looking for family. And what I thought would be a really quick kind of volunteer opportunity to record a podcast about how I was dealing with the pandemic turned into I want to say 3 years now, a relationship with other young people who are like me, who are advocates for other young people like me. It's a space that's youth-led by people with lived experience, and I can really feel that on the conversations that we have and the projects that we come up with. It was and still is a space that I truly felt heard and seen, and I felt like I really belonged. In terms of unlearning and relearning, there were a lot of things I carried with me into the space, like adoption disruptions or breakdowns are so rare and it only happened to me, and it doesn't really happen to that many people. And I met some other kids who it did happen to them, and maybe it happened more than once to them. And it demystified that whole, this is a really rare experience and it must have had something to do with me, to finally being with other people who've had that same experience and shared same feelings that I did as a result of that experience. It's become a place where I have friends who resemble the same lived experience as I do, and I don't have to over-explain maybe something that happened to me that I really just need to vent. As soon as I enter the space, I'm just understood, and I'm really supported. to the extent that now I live in Vancouver, on the other side of the country, with a 3-hour time difference, and those relationships have been so powerful and so impactful that I still maintain them in spite of those challenges today. So I'm really thankful to those spaces for helping me unlearn and giving me a space to be heard and to feel like I belong, and for teaching me that I also have a critical role in supporting other people like me and others that have been touched by adoption and permanency.
Thank you, Marko. You touch on so many important points about peer support and how powerful that can be for people, and realizing that you're not alone in this journey, and really that permanency. You were talking about the second space to be permanency is lifelong, and even if you don't find legal permanency before you age out of care, the different types of permanency that are so important in children and youth's life. So I really thank you for sharing your experiences. Next, I'll move on to Karina. Your question is, what is something you wish more people knew about adoption?
Thank you, Chrissy, and thank you, Marko, for sharing all of that. It was, thank you, Larry as well. My goodness. This issue with what I wish people knew about adoption is very close to my heart. My best to answer without crying. I wish people knew that the desire to be adopted doesn't end at a certain age. I work with teens, and even at 18 and past 19, even when they've already aged out of the system, I see that more than anything, they desire to have a family and a stable home. And there are a lot of kids in waiting, but I work with a lot of kids who never even made it to a waiting list because of different circumstances and just different reasons. And so what they do have in common is that all of them have that desire to be loved and to be wanted and to have a stable place to call home and a family of their own. And that doesn't depend, or it doesn't change because of the status of their files or because of their age. And a lot of my kids, I think that, I guess the older they get, they are still longing to be adopted, and as much as the little ones, but they start losing hope, because the reality is that the older the kids get, the more difficult it is for them to be adopted. In my work as a foster parent, and I work only with teens, and my work is mainly helping them transition into adulthood. And they turn 19 and they have to just walk into life, go out of a system, and they have to succeed on their own. And so we work with, their education and trying to, we encourage them to find jobs and things like that. And so it is a very, very painful process to witness. So I would like to mention that sometimes a lot of the focus, especially for the little ones and for teens, is placed on the file. And that's just the short story, the short information that we get from a child. But what we read in those pages really isn't who our kid is. And so it only gives us an idea of some of the past experiences, and even that is through the lenses of somebody else who wrote that. And so it is still not the full picture. It just gives us a very broad glimpse of situations and experiences, but it really doesn't define who our kid is. And as an example, I had a youth who had a very challenging, as they told me, file. And he was coming out of rehab, and he was coming out of juvie, and they even told me, don't stay along with him. It was just difficult, apparently, on paper. And I learned through him from the beginning that things are never what they seem. There's always a reason, there's always a story. And this kid was just the most amazing kid ever. And he was just super kind, always respectful, always appreciative, always amazing. And it was a 180 degrees from reality, from what I was actually expecting, or even from what I was reading. And so all he needed was acceptance and a ton of unconditional love and consistency. So we were able to build a very beautiful connection. And I had the privilege of seeing him restore his life and move forward in his life and never look back. And so the printed story of his life was missing basically everything about who he really is, his essence and his beautiful heart. And there's something incredible that comes out of loving a child. And no matter what the circumstances are, or their past, or especially their age, it's just amazing when you start pouring your heart into this life. But because some kids, the older they get, the thicker that folder gets. And so some kids actually share a similar story on paper, and they often get passed on. And I can tell you, it really can be quite the opposite from what you expected. And of course, we lean on the advice from people that are around us, and this is where it's very important to build those connections and that openness from the beginning. It's very helpful to talk to biological parents, of course, and to foster parents to get to know our kid beyond that printed description. And so, of course, we want for the adoption to be successful. And I think adoptive parents deserve to have as much information as possible to make that decision, because they also want to be the best they can for their kid. And so I'm here to encourage you to just try to discover, I guess, your kid's potential and who he really is and or she really is beyond what's written, and regardless of their age and regardless of their story. So I was here at home when one of my kids received the news about a family wanting to adopt him. And I can't tell you, he was just walking on sunshine. Now, he loves his biological parents dearly, and he has his siblings, and he's a very loved kid, and both his biological parents are amazing, and we still have an open relationship with them. And he was 14 at the time, but he was waiting, and he was waiting while I was his foster parent, and he waited for a long time. And so he was 14 when he received this amazing news of a forever family. And this boy received this gift from his biological parents, and the adoptive family and myself, we were able to create a team that actually made things a lot more smoother, I guess, for the kid. And it was just incredibly amazing to see how basically they were a match made in heaven. And that relationship grew, and we have a friendship now with the biological parents and the adoptive parents and all of that. I feel that the love and that stability that you can provide a child of any age can really be a very powerful thing. And it involves, as Sherry was saying, the biological family and the foster parents, and of course, you as an adoptive parent. And for me, it was amazing to see that a 14-year-old kid could have a happily ever after. So if you find it in your heart, consider adopting an older kid. It really, I can guarantee you that when you start pouring your love and your care and your time and your heart and everything you are into this child's life, and it's unconditional love, you're going to see amazing things happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina, for sharing. I think you talk about a really important thing about looking past the files, especially with children who are in care. And a big thing with adoption is if children have labels or diagnoses, and what that can do in the prevention of permanency. And also just how important that belonging piece is with permanency and how those children and youth feel.
That's an important thing, if I may add, Christy, the labels, because we read a lot of labels. And sometimes it can be something, I mean, it's painful to see because like I said, I work with teens, and so most of them are just aging out. And I see that a lot of it is because of the labels. And if we move past the labels, we see that even love is capable of restoring a lot of things, because the kids are going, I mean, imagine they've been in so many different homes, a lot of them. They've experienced, we read reactive attachment disorder. But if we talk to the child, and yes, of course, they're going to be afraid to attach because they've had so many homes, so many foster parents, and then they have their biological parents, and so it's tough for them. But seeing beyond that, and being that stable piece in their lives while still connecting with everybody else, every relationship in their lives, it really is just beautiful. It makes you're going to see the difference, not just in their behavior, in their it's physical and it's emotional, and it's at every level. You're going to see a miracle happen.
Yeah, thank you. Connection's so important. For the next question, I'm going to move on to Stephan. And same question, what is something you wish more people knew about adoption?
I think I just have to qualify. I'm someone who's just always around kids. I go to a lot of 12-step meetings, and I'm always the one babysitting the kids in the back. I'm the one at the park who's always playing with all the kids, and then the parents are like at the end, like, "Hey, thanks for watching my kids for the last 45 minutes." So I consider myself a little bit on the sort of beat of kid culture. And the internet meme, I think that people need to know about the internet meme, "You are adopted," is something that is just, they hear all the time. They've created this awful connotations associated with the word adoption. I think it started with the dogs, and then people are like, "You're adopted," and the dog makes that weird face. But it's in all of a lot of the TikToks that my son watches and the kids watch, and they've just had this association with the word of adoption and not being wanted. And I just cringe so hard just at the fallacy of it, and just the pain of if hearing when my daughter would hear that. And for me, adoption is the gift of watching my daughter grow up in growing in the care of the most loving, talented, incredible two people I've ever like met. I get emotional just thinking about them. They're just unbelievable. Like I literally think about her being with them and I get tearful. Like she's so lucky just to grow in such an amazing, 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 amazing place. It's just such a privilege for her. Something I didn't realize until more recently is adoption is the gift for her parents, right? Like just seeing the joy. Like I never thought about that really for some reason. Just seeing the joy in their eyes, the satisfaction, the tired, yes, but in their eyes. And it's such a gift for them, right? It's a gift for my daughter. It's a gift for them. And it's a gift for me because it allowed me to redefine the most painful, like powerful experience in my life. At one time, the shame and guilt that I felt for bringing an innocent life into this toxic, disgusting environment would literally just render me in the fetal position crying for the longest time. Like I couldn't think about it. I would just be like in tears, literally fetal position crying. However, thanks to my sort of recovery journey, and just understanding the win-win-win situations, and also just the fact that I fought for adoption from before she was born. There was just, I knew that I thought I could get clean, but I just knew that if I was ever had to deal with her mother, I wouldn't be able to be clean. And I just saw this as the chances for that to happen were so minimal. And are we going to risk a life for this low chance? And I fought and I fought for adoption. And it was one of the first things that I could take pride in a long time, right? Like I was a struggling addict. And it allowed me to redefine and just say, hey, this was a horrible situation that I brought on, but I pushed for what was best for my daughter. And thanks to the openness, I get to witness this pleasure, this amazing gift, right? For me, adoption is such a beautiful thing. And it just, and even in adults, just when I mention the word like adoption, giving my daughter up for adoption, people will often just sort of like stop and just like not continue on the subject. Whereas for me, it's like one of the most amazing thing ever. So it's just, and so in the child culture, hearing you're adopted is something that on TikTok it's said a lot. And in the adult culture. And I just wish that people could understand that this can really be a win-win-win situation and a gift for everyone involved. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing your story and talking about the gift of adoption. It is such a gift for so many people, and I think that's really important to acknowledge and kind of work towards decreasing the stigma against adoption, and that it is a positive thing. Thank you everybody for sharing. I'm going to pass it back to Sam, and we're going to just quickly run through the final question. Sam, if you want to ask.
Yeah, so this is our final round. We're just gonna ask this question. If we can just try to keep it as quick as we can, just for time wise, but we still don't want to stop you from being able to give your full answers, but just keeping time in mind. I will start with Ashleigh on this question. Can you please start, Ashleigh, by sharing with us one challenge your adoption journey as a professional and one joy, and with one joy?
Yeah, I'd say that probably lots of joys to share, but one challenge would probably just be the system that kids need to navigate through and how hard that is. And I think the general public doesn't understand what that journey looks like for children and youth in government care in Canada. And so that's an ongoing challenge that I think needs more awareness, because if more people knew about it, maybe there would be changes to it, real systemic changes for helping those kids and youth. I think for joys that there are is that I think that I know the adoption is based off of loss, and that can't be overstated enough, that that's where the foundation of adoption is. And within that loss, with people coming together with the sole purpose of loving somebody is joyous. That is joyous. People who never would have had connections in other points of life are now coming together to surround a little one to hold them up and to hold space for them and value them, and for people to work together. That in itself, out of loss, can be joyous. So I think that would probably be my examples.
Thank you, Ashleigh. I agree with both of everything that you said, and that the navigating the system is really hard. And so to promote awareness around that is really important. I will go next to Marko. Can you please start by sharing with one challenge on your adoption journey and end by sharing one joy on your adoption journey, please?
Yeah, I mean, I wish there was only one challenge in the adoption and permanency journey, but I think the biggest one for me is finding balance amongst very different elements in child welfare. We talked about the file and finding balance between what's written in the file and what's actually playing out in real life. The balance between, I usually tell prospective parents, you're trying to balance doing the most selfless thing with the most selfish thing, and how do we find balance between those two things? People tell us that you should be grateful that you're adopted, it's so much better for you now, but we also have to grieve the loss that adoption is built upon. Finding those balances between, I guess, the human experience of contradiction really is the challenge. And I think the one joy for me in this adoption permanency journey has been meeting all the people that I've met and all the stories that I've heard and the spaces I've been invited into that I otherwise wouldn't have experienced without being an adoptee myself.
Thank you, Marko. I appreciate your sharing. I will move on to Sherry and ask you to share one challenge and one joy in your adoption journey, please.
So one challenge in our adoption journey has been, like people are mentioning, accessing support with a broken system. Older children that have been in foster care can struggle with many things, including early childhood trauma, intergender intergenerational trauma, diverse abilities, learning disabilities, abandonment and attachment struggles, executive functioning impairments, and may deal with racism and bullying. There's often no designation or acknowledgement in schools or society for what they have experienced. They may have low self-esteem, shame and blame, difficulty socializing and expressing themselves emotionally. They will probably struggle with even knowing how they feel and why at times. When you adopt them, they may not have had any assessments or need updated assessments, medication, and professional support. It's a lot to access and find services that are available as everyone is overbooked, overworked, and there are long wait lists. We have had to be persistent and constantly advocate, think outside the box, be resourceful and creative. We have tried multiple methods of education from the public system to homeschooling and blended programs. We have found that certain programs work for certain reasons and at certain times. What works one year, one semester might not work the next, and these decisions don't have to be permanent. At the time, it seems like a big decision, but we are flexible and work with our kids to always find the best fit for where they are at in their learning, development, and comfort level. There are options out there. You just need to be proactive, talk to other parents, and connect with resources. What these kids have been through and deal with physically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally is tough. They carry a heavy load, and a lot of what they face on a daily basis is invisible and misunderstood. They need to find programs where they do feel understood, supported, respected, comfortable, and feel like they belong. It's not easy navigating this, but when you find something that works, it's life-changing for everyone. What fostered and adopted children may have been through is not their fault, and they try very hard to adapt and cope. It always touches my heart when I think about how brave they are and how hard they try. They are the sweetest kids, and they need a chance with people to love them and give them stability, and for all of us as a community to have compassion and help guide them. If you have any type of a relationship with a vulnerable child, remember that these kids really just want to feel accepted, and a friendly smile, a compliment, or just asking them about their day goes a long way. It's hard to talk about one joy as there are so many, but I have to say my biggest joy is creating a family I'm so proud of, watching my kids overcome so many obstacles, our openness with a large extended family that continues to grow and is rich in culture and experiences. We have a very full life, full of love. We are a team, committed to each other forever. I always feel there's a peacefulness to permanency, as we know we can get through anything because we're all in this together. We will never give up on each other, and we have a huge support network that is with us every step of the way.
Thank you for sharing. Appreciate all of your words. I will move on to Karina and ask you the same question. One challenge and one joy on your adoption journey.
Thank you. Yes, for sure, navigating the system is very challenging. But for me, I guess on the personal level, the challenge is the same as the joy. My kid was getting adopted, and for me to see that one of my kids' dream was being fulfilled was incredible. He was so happy, and I was extremely happy with him as well. And I think the day he received the news, it was for me, that I am so happy. He's so happy, and I'm so happy for him. But at the same time, it meant that I was losing my kid. And so, of course, we love our kids like they're our sons as foster parents. And I was really scared of the unknown, and he was too. So we were both going through the roller coaster of emotions, so happy and then so heartbroken. And he kept on saying, "I'm gonna miss you, and I'm gonna miss, his foster sibling and our dogs and everything." So it was, but at the same time, I'm so happy, and I'm gonna be doing this and that with my adoptive parents. And so it was definitely, we were all over the place at first. And I think that all of the emotions improved, and for me, my heart found a lot of comfort the second I connected with his adoptive parents for the first time. That very first time, it was just, I was blown away by how perfect they are. And so from that point on, we were able to still communicate and you know, throughout the visits and the back and forth. And in our case in particular, there was distance involved, so there was a lot of planning and a lot of conversations and whatnot. And so we were able to build a beautiful relationship. And so it just, all my stress and all my fears just went completely down. It was so beautiful to see that, you know what, they're a family, they belong, they're great together, and just seeing my boy so happy and seeing that now he is a son. He's not just a youth in care, he's a son, he belongs. And the same with his biological family, you know, he's loved from every angle, and he maintains those relationships thanks to this amazing family. And so yes, it was sad, it was hard seeing him go. As Sherry was saying, for us foster parents, see them go when they age out, and we see them go if they're getting adopted. But through that pain, there's beauty as well. I stay in touch with all of my kids, adopted or not. And past 19, I'm still in touch with all of my kids and as many relatives as I can as well. Yes, it's been a beautiful experience, and I thank each of you here today considering adoption. I thank you for this beautiful gift, and I thank Stephan and all the biological parents who are giving this amazing gift to their kids and to the adoptive families as well.
Thank you for sharing, Karina. I could see the joy in your face and hear it in your voice. It's great. Thank you for sharing. I will go to Stephan now and ask you the same question. One challenge and one joy on your adoption journey.
I'm not sure how relevant they will be to anyone else, but they're just so overpowering for me, I guess. The challenge that for me was when my daughter was born, I was pushing for adoption, and other family members were just telling me that I shouldn't be allowed to be at any of these meetings. They would yell at me, and they just had these really loud voices about how I obviously don't care because I want to put her up. I want to choose adoption. And I was at the lowest point in my life, but I pushed for it and pushed, but it was excruciatingly painful just having everyone just like loudly yell that I didn't care, and that's why I wanted it, and it was just an extremely painful time. And the joy, I think, there's this dynamic every time usually when I hang out with my daughter, it's my son and my niece and nephew. And my daughter is more interested in them, like her brother and the other child, but it's always all of us playing. And then the other three are more interested in me, and we have this sort of like three-way. But then I guess a month ago, I was saying goodbye to her. And she was at the car, and then she was just holding my arm, and she was just squeezing my arm, and she just wouldn't let go. And we spent, I don't know, a good 5-6 minutes just talking, and she was just like, can I see you next weekend? Can we go swimming next weekend? And just feeling the connection with her was just a moment that I'll never forget. And it's a powerful moment in my journey. Yeah, I guess those are my challenge and joy.
Thank you. Everything that is very impactful, and I'm sure that it is going to be beneficial for other people, and there will be other adoptive or biological parents that are watching this later that will be able to relate to everything that every single one of you have said today. I'm going to pass it on in a minute after to Marko to just end us in a good way before we end the recording and do a little debrief. But I just wanted to, before I did that, say thank you, like seriously from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for sharing your words, for being willing to share some of your lived experience, some of your clinical experience, some of your family's journey, everything you've talked about people out in the galaxy, within your own galaxy, outside the community. Just, it has been so impactful for me, and I can speak that I feel that it will be very impactful for other people that get to watch this panel as well. I'll let Christy say a little thank you because I think she probably wants to as well before we let Marko end in a good way. But thank you very much, everybody. And I just want to let you know that Karina had to hop off, our manager, but she just wanted to say that how impactful this was to her as well. and she wanted us to thank you all.
Yeah, I would also just like to thank everybody for taking time out of your day to join us, and all your openness and willingness to share your personal experiences and your knowledge around adoption and permanency. I agree with Sam. It's going to be so valuable to our community, and we really, really thank you. Marko, if you'd like to do the closing remarks.
All right, gotta wipe away the sweat. Here we go, big moment. I just want to thank the Adoptive Families Association of BC, first and foremost, for giving us this space, for really many members of the adoption and permanency galaxy and constellation. We're talking about foster parents, original parents, clinicians, adoptive parents, adoptees. That we have quite a rich community. The stories that I've gotten to share and that I've got to hear today, I mean, they're all medicine for me, and I know for the rest of the day I'll be carrying them with me and unlearning and relearning, as I've talked about already. But this event was not just to share our stories. Really, what this panel event was for was to create awareness about adoption and permanency. And so I asked the audience after this event, I encourage you to have conversations about adoption and permanency, not with someone already involved with adoption and permanency or already in this space, but with someone outside who may have never heard about adoption and permanency. Maybe that is somebody you bump into at the grocery store, or a parent you meet at the schoolyard, or wherever it might be. But that is how we create awareness, by inviting people who wouldn't normally be in these spaces, to help them and invite them and encourage them with that. And with that, I want to thank everybody for such an amazing panel event. Thank you so much.
I'm